Ah, Gendry. What is that Warhammer? Anyway, I've already done the video about the Warhammer. Let's talk about helmets. So this is partially a video about Game of Thrones and partially just a video about, shall we say, fantasy and medieval stuff in TV and film. And one of the things that I often rant about is the lack of helmets. I'm going to talk a little bit about that more here, but really what I wanted to talk about in this video is the sort of loved scene at the end of this episode where our heroes, who've assembled over the course of many seasons, many of the most loved characters from Game of Thrones have assembled together, a bit like the Avengers, to go through the gate of the wall and go into the wastelands north of the wall. And really I want to analyse, are they well prepared for that? Now, ironically, two characters in Game of Thrones who did indeed have helmets are these two guys, and the helmets didn't make it the slightest bit of difference whatsoever, because Gendry got his plus 20 Vorpal hammer of striking out, and with his 0 skill just went badom badom, whack-a-mole, and killed them both. And yeah, it was fun to watch. I felt it took we knew that was coming. It took a long time for that hammer to meet some skulls. But one thing I do want to say before I launch into this rant, some people might call it, is simply the fact that actually Game of Thrones on the whole is not that bad in terms of showing soldiers, certainly common soldiers, with helmets. We see a lot of the Lannister soldiers and obviously the Dothraki and various, not so much the Dothraki actually, more the Unsullied is what I'm talking about. We see the Unsullied with helmets, we don't see the Dothraki with helmets. I don't have an issue with the fact that the Dothraki don't have helmets because they don't wear anything and they make a particular point of not wearing armour, so I don't have a problem with that. But lots of the other soldiers, certainly in the north and like Robb Stark's men, all that kind of stuff, we see them with helmets. So that's really, really good. But where Game of Thrones falls down from an arms and armour perspective, and yes, I know, as always, whenever I post these videos, lots of you, well not lots, but some of you go, Matt, it's just a TV show, chill out, man. Look, first of all, I'm not that bothered, but I run a TV channel talking about arms and armour. Therefore, I'm going to criticise arms and armour errors in TV shows, because that's what I'm here to do. Welcome to YouTube, folks. Okay, so really, really good that these guys are wearing helmets, but other main characters, like Jon Snow and others, probably should be wearing helmets more. And of course, famously in the books, like the Hound, for example, famously does wear a helmet, and yet he practically never wears a helmet in the show. Anyway, let's go and actually look at what those avenging heroes who go through the gate, through the wall, what they're actually equipped with, and see how well prepared they are. So here are our heroes, and who have we got here? We've got Beric Dondarrion, we've got the Hound, we've got the Onion Knight, Jon Snow, Gendry, we've got Ser Jorah. We've got a really good assemblage. These are the Avengers of Game of Thrones, or the Defenders, whichever genre you prefer. And you know, these are a pretty good assemblage of characters. But bearing in mind that 3 of them have just come out of a prison cell, they're probably not very well equipped, are they? You think that probably they should be equipped before they kind of go off into the... I have to say, it looks like actually in the prison cell, and this is where it was incorrect, I think in the prison cell they were still wearing elements of their normal fighting clothes. Generally speaking, in a medieval context, even if it's fantasy, if you throw some people into a prison cell, you don't normally leave them in their fighting gear. You normally take their armour off because, you know, you want a prisoner to be fairly easy to handle, quite easy to hurt in case they try to fight back and all of that kind of thing. So in medieval art, we often see helmets have taken off, which is kind of ironic here, but helmets are taken off and armour is taken off and all this kind of stuff so that you can manipulate the prisoner. So let's kind of ignore the fact that in their prison cells they were still wearing elements of their armour. I think the Hound was in his regular gear, which is kind of like a weird brigandine with bits of plate, and the other two aren't particularly armoured. I think there might be a breastplate in there somewhere, but anyway, they're wearing their standard gear, and basically all the others are as well. And this is where we kind of really get to the crux of the matter. In Game of Thrones and TV and film in general, armour, unfortunately, is usually treated as costume. And that's the shame of it, because armour isn't, and despite the fact Game of Thrones, as I've mentioned, Game of Thrones is not that bad with armour. Some of the armour's kind of okay and kind of makes sense. And we see Ser Jorah fight a Dothraki earlier on, where the armour does stop the blow from the Dothraki sword and things like this. So they absolutely, just as George R.R. Martin does acknowledge the effectiveness of armour, like for example when Oberyn fights the Mountain, the fact that he uses a poisoned weapon and his normal blows wouldn't have any effect on the Mountain in his armour. In G.R.R. Martin's writings, armour seems to be relatively well understood and relatively well described, but that doesn't always translate very well to the screen. There's that famous scene where the Hound is talking to Arya, and Arya, he says your sword's useless against armour. And he demonstrates that fact by the fact that her sword won't go through his armour. We since know, of course, that she's known how to fight around the armour, which is one of the ways that you do get around armour. But by and large, for what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is it 7 people? I think there's 7 people going north of the wall. You would expect them to be somewhat better equipped. They were just wearing their standard gear. There isn't a single helmet here. Now, you might argue if you're going into what's essentially a snow blizzard, there may be some disadvantage to wearing a helmet. Conversely, there may be some advantage to wearing a helmet. I would think pretty much that if you're going into Arctic conditions, wearing something on your head is probably a good idea. If you're going into Arctic conditions and expecting to be in hand-to-hand combat, wearing something on your head is a really fucking good idea, like the best idea you could have. And if you're going to wear any armour whatsoever, and I've made this point in previous videos, if you're only going to wear one item of armour, make it a helmet. Okay, your head is pretty important, intrinsic to the rest of your kind of body and doing things. So they should all have helmets. That's the first thing. And if they don't have a helmet, just a big fluffy woolly hat would be really, really good. Bare heads, bad news. They do have some hats, in fairness, I'll give them that. What's his name has got a nice man bun up there as well. Dennis Pennis, for any of you who remember that actor. Anyway, so going back to this, so they don't have helmets. They should have helmets. Shields, there's no shields there. To me, shields seem like a pretty good idea in just about any combat situation. Okay, unless you're operating a missile weapon like a bow or a crossbow, or unless you're holding a big pike in a pike block, this kind of thing, or halberd. If you're just kind of adventuring around, then a shield or even just a buckler is a damn good idea. Okay, so they should have helmets, they should have shields or bucklers. But also, haven't they been mining dragonglass for like weeks or months? Or it's difficult to, because they've been travelling around on dragons and ships that travel bizarrely quickly across Westeros. We don't really know how much time is supposed to have passed at this point. But given that they've been mining dragonglass for some amount of time, you would think, maybe some dragonglass arrowheads? Maybe some dragonglass spears. Pole arms. Why don't they have either missile weapons or pole arms? All they've got are sidearms. They've got some axes, some swords, Gendry's stupid warhammer, no helmets, no shields. Like, dudes, are you complete noobs at this? Have you never been adventuring before? Did you take an arrow to the knee? I don't know. Like, why aren't you more prepared? They don't even really seem to have very much general camping or travelling stuff. Where are they going to sleep? How long? Maybe they're not intending to be out there for that long, I don't know. But you'd think they'd just have more stuff and definitely more weapons, unless they're purely intending to sneak around and run away if they get into trouble, which, knowing Jon Snow, I think is probably fairly unlikely. And seeing how Gendry wanted to just batter everything with his hammer, I think that's fairly unlikely on his part as well. And come on, the Hound, he's not going to run away from anything. I don't think he can, because he's a bit limp in one leg. But essentially they're completely under-equipped. I keep banging on about helmets. Helmets. More helmets. We need more helmets, especially on heroes. Lord of the Rings was terrible for this as well. But should be more helmets, and they need either pole arms, pole weapons, or missile weapons. Bows would be the best, and dragonglass. Like, They should have lots of dragon glass arrows and spearheads and all this kind of stuff, and they should be carrying it. And shields, come on. Shields, they protect you from missile weapons, they buy you time in combat, they enable you to fight multiple opponents at the same time without dying immediately. And if you're not wearing very much armour, like frankly these guys aren't, shields also a freaking good idea. So to conclude, these guys to me look a bit, well, 7 of them, these 7 guys look a bit like mincemeat. They're lacking armour, they're lacking shields, they're lacking polearms, they're lacking missile weapons, and they seem to be lacking common sense as well. But I wish them the best, and I look forward to seeing how they manage against the Army of the Dead on tonight's episode. Cheers, folks. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, follow us on Facebook. You can buy t-shirts through Spreadshirt, support us on Patreon, or follow us on Pinterest. Thank you.